Sketching across Greece. Greece is a place renowned for its beautiful scenery, often mispronounced food, and surprising synergy with ABBA's discography. But to most people, the first thing that comes to mind are its ancient temples and artwork, which have continued to influence Western society throughout the millennia. But personally, I'm someone who struggled to find inspiration in ancient Greek art. The symmetry and repetition in the architecture seemed uninteresting, and the realistic, perfect figures in the sculpture were unattainable, no matter how much I drew or worked out. But maybe there was something I was missing, and maybe I would find it in Greece. Today I'll be sharing with you some of my experiences and sketches from my visit to this beautiful place. While I'd like to say that I have all the time and money to travel and challenge all of my artistic prejudices, that would be untrue. This actually wasn't a trip dedicated to drawing. In fact, it was a family trip to celebrate my brother's graduation from college. To prevent being left behind, I needed to draw extremely quickly, yet create something recognizable and, dare I say, good enough for a YouTube video. Here are my tools: sketchbook, pencil, and a variety of ink pens. Felt nib, brush, micron, and my favorite pen, a ballpoint that busted during the very first sketch and had to be immediately thrown away. In particular, I was thinking of the loose, fast styles of Ruby Poon and Rebecca Sugar. I love how Rebecca's art conveys so much life in such a short span of time. It would be my mission to apply that spirit to static temples that have been around forever. Our home base for the trip was Athens, a city covered in ancient history and modern graffiti. Athens struggled to make a good first impression, which wasn't helped by our decision to walk, jet-lagged and hungry, right through one of the rougher neighborhoods immediately after arriving in town. However, as we spent more time in the city, I came to love the outdoor cafes and lively pedestrian districts. We stumbled upon some really beautiful side streets packed with lively tavernas, ranging from classically Mediterranean to maximalist Disney fever dreams. And it was always a pleasant surprise to look down the road and see some ancient ruins towering above you. The Acropolis, of course, was fantastic. I was almost more impressed by the entrance to it, a triumphant staircase flanked by massive pillars and the lonely temple of Athena Nike. It felt like you were entering Atlantis, or to my pathetically modern, Disney-addled mind, it looked like we were lining up for the coolest theme park ride ever. Even in its eroded state, it still clearly conveyed the feeling of entering somewhere special. As a Nashvilleian, I was already very familiar with the Parthenon, but despite all the wear and tear on Athens' version, it was still very impressive. What being a Nashvilleian had not prepared me for was that there were other buildings up here, not just the Parthenon. Perhaps the most striking feature were the humanoid pillars, called caryatids, of the neighboring Erechtheion. The original pillars were moved to the Parthenon Museum, where I was able to get a sketch. However, the best preserved temple in Athens was probably the Temple of Hephaestus, which had some beautiful vantage points in a quiet and relatively secluded setting. No trip to Greece would be complete without the food. My favorite food was moussaka, which is kind of like a Greek lasagna, and my favorite drink was a cappuccino fritto, an exceedingly fancy-looking cousin of the iced latte. Honestly, what I was most looking forward to on this trip was just drinking a nice drink while looking up at some ruins, and if that sounds like your idea of a good time, I recommend checking out the places around the ancient agora. It was a relief to get out of the city and explore the Greek countryside a bit. Our first stop was Delphi, a cluster of ruins overlooking a valley of olive trees. These ruins could not have been located in a more picturesque spot. If I had been an ancient Greek, this is where I would have wanted to live. You could hear the birds chirping amongst the treasuries and memorials that dotted the path up to the sanctuary of Apollo, where the famous oracle once dispensed her wisdom. Again, I found the approach to the main temple to be as impressive as the temple itself. The most renowned arts competition in ancient Greece, the Pythian Games, was also held here in Delphi. It would have been awesome to stand in the place where the artists of that time duked it out through verse and paint, but unfortunately the stadium ruins were closed during our visit, and I was a little disappointed I couldn't run across it like Rick Steves did. We continued north to Meteora, probably my favorite spot we visited. Looking up from the town below, the gray spires loomed over everything. Looking down from the monasteries above, I felt like I was on a floating island, a little pocket of civilization in the sky. It was certainly surreal to see birds soaring beneath me. This is definitely a place I'd like to come back to, especially since they have a mushroom museum, which I was not able to visit. It was in the airport on the way to Crete that I discovered the Instagram account See the Lines. Watching Alan draw was a huge breakthrough since his process was so impressionist, fun, and unconcerned with line quality. His basic steps were sketch a loose silhouette line in ink, block in shadows with tone, refine with further ink drawings. I love this process since it's such a simple way of going from big shapes to small details, with the shadows giving a loose guide for future lines that you're free to deviate from. Most importantly, I discovered that ugly lines might look totally fine within the context of a larger sketch. Especially given my time constraints, it wasn't worth it for me to obsess over any particular line. Crete is an island with a variety of moods, from arid, sun-baked coasts to lush, cloud-topped mountains where wild oregano and sage grow by the roadside. While my favorite place in Greece was Meteora, my favorite day was here on Crete. We had an excellent driver who showed us his hometown on the Lassithi Plateau, a farming region once famous for its windmills. However, much of the windmills, as well as its population, has dwindled away. It felt like a place whose way of life was slowly fading into memory, but I was glad to experience it before it went. Here we ate the most Greek yogurt I've ever eaten, got coffee in a cafe patronized exclusively by elderly farmers, and toured a pottery workshop where I got my own tiny windmill. The weather here changed constantly, cycling through fog, rain, and sun in a matter of minutes. I wasn't able to do many drawings this day due to the day's pace and weather, until we reached the museum. If you go to Crete, be sure to check out the museum, as well as the archaeological site, as most of the Minoan frescoes, including the famous bull leapers, have all been relocated here. The Minoan artwork had such bold, bubbly shapes and colors. Despite being some of the most ancient things we saw, it felt the most modern. By this point in the trip, I realized that what I really wanted to capture in my sketches was the feeling of the places we were visiting. Trying to record perspective lines and details accurately on the page made the temples look small and shabby, when in reality even a few standing pillars, like here in ancient Corinth, could command your respect and attention. From this point on, I tried to exaggerate perspective and scratch lines even more quickly to capture the majestic quality of these old stones. This didn't mean that the drawings were necessarily faster. I still spent plenty of time observing and thinking, just that I tried to focus more on observing the subject than making careful marks on the page. I would have loved to stay longer here in the citadel of Mykene, but spent too long sketching the Lion's Gate. This site, which is connected to the heroes of Homer's Iliad, used huge stones, which gave it an almost charming and stylized appearance. In addition to the Iliad, I was reminded of Rohan from Tolkien's epic, as it looked out over the peaceful valley spread beneath the citadel. Nafplio, the first modern capital of Greece, is a delightful seaside town, especially in the Old Town district, where every alleyway is a pretty composition of pastel buildings and balconies. I think this is what we had all imagined Athens would be like, so I don't know why King Otto would have wanted to move the capital away from here, aside from, the Parthenon and stuff. Our trip ended at Cape Sunio, the southern outpost where the ancient Athenians built a temple to Poseidon. If you pictured Temple of the Sea God in your head, you'd probably think of something like this. Sun-bleached ruins perched high above the deep blue, looking out over the vast, unknown expanses of ocean. Yet instead of feeling cliché, it just felt perfect. Imagine what it must have been like to be an ancient Athenian tending to this distant outpost here, sheltered by this grand display of civilization against the untamable wilderness. This is what I've been missing, the context, the way these great works of art fit into their landscape. On their own, I might have found the temple designs monotonous and stiff, but when such a highly mathematical structure is placed atop a rugged mountain or against the wild sea, the contrast is beautiful. Many of these sites also required you to ascend a winding path to the main structure, further building your excitement and reverence for the place you're about to visit. Maybe I've just played too many adventure games, but I also think that ruins are a particularly enchanting theme. The implied story of the structure's past gives way to the excitement of modern discoveries and treasure hunting. It's both somber and inspiring. A place like the Temple of Poseidon seemed once to defy the wilderness, but now it's being embraced back into it. It's easy to feel connected to history in Greece, and while I'm not sure how much my sketches will add to the long legacy of artists documenting this place, They were a fun way to discover what I loved about it and remember my time there. The lonely ruins, the countryside, and of course the food impressed me in a way that I didn't quite expect. I hope you enjoyed joining me on this quick sketching tour across Greece. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.